We're actually winding down this quarter. We've got a couple more sessions. Today what we're looking at is when material consumes. Our passage, 1 John chapter 2, verses 12 through 17, and chapter 3, verses 16 through 18. And here's the main point. Possessions won't last and they don't satisfy, but the love of God does. One of the most well-known verses in the Bible is John 3:16. It starts out like this: "For God so loved the world." But then John tells us in these verses, do not love the world. So these ideas, in a certain sense, seem to be in conflict with one another. But really the context helps us to understand it. When the Bible says God loved the world, he's talking about the people in the world. And we're absolutely called to love people just like God does and like Jesus does. But on the other hand, when John says do not love the world or the things in the world, what he's saying is we're not to value the same things that the world values, which goes against the principles and the commands of God. So it's about the context and about the meaning of the word world. In fact, John made a strikingly strong statement. Listen to this. John says, if anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. John's saying that we can't love the world and love God at the same time. They're mutually exclusive. They're things that compete against one another. So we have to decide. In order for us to understand how to love God and how to avoid loving the world, let's look at ways that people are tempted to love the world. The first one is what the Bible calls the lust of the flesh. This means our physical appetites, the appetites for food, things like sex, even sleep. Those were designed to draw us into a relationship with God, to help us to understand how we can depend on God for our provider and to experience meaning and connection and things like that. But instead of like eating something and thanking God for it and letting that be a picture of our satisfaction ultimately in Jesus as the bread of life, we selfishly indulge, and it goes completely against the purpose for which God designed it. And the same applies to sex and sleep as well. That's lust of the flesh. The second one, lust of the eyes. This talks more about our mental appetites, entertainment, intellectual endeavors. We can definitely idolize those things and devote ourselves to things that just aren't pleasing and in line with God's principles. And then finally, pride in possessions. This means valuing, even idolizing the things that we possess, the things that we have, such as material things, even our gifts and talents, our bodies. It seems funny to me that something like good looks, people would become prideful over that when we have absolutely nothing to do with it. It's clearly a gift from God. But the truth of the matter, everything that we have in our lives is a gift from God and should never become a source of pride. Here's the practical application that we're going to look at today. How do we balance enjoying our possessions but not being consumed by them? There are two general perspectives when it comes to material things. One is what I have is mine. That's a very selfish perspective, obviously. And the other one is just the opposite. Everything belongs to God, and it's an issue of stewardship. I want to read a couple of verses to you. 1 Timothy chapter 6, beginning of verse 17 says this: "Instruct those who are rich in the present age not to be arrogant or to set their hope on the uncertainty of wealth, but on God who richly provides us with all things to enjoy. Instruct them to do what is good, to be rich in good works, to be generous and willing to share." Here's what Paul says to Timothy. He says, hey, if you got a lot of stuff, don't trust in that, because ultimately it's going to pass away. And by the way, everything that we have comes from God. It's okay to enjoy those things, but what the people are to enjoy is not keeping them to themselves, but sharing it and using those possessions for the sake of drawing other people to God. To love others and to be obedient to God's commands when it comes to our possessions means to be willing to sacrifice what I have in order to see others blessed and ultimately drawn into a relationship with God. To love stuff means I keep what I have for myself. To love God means I'm ready to give it away. One reflects the spirit and the heart of Jesus, and the other reflects the love of the world. God has clearly called us to be followers of Jesus in this way, particularly as we're concerning ourselves today with the way we use our possessions. Help your students to make practical choices to use their possessions for the sake of the kingdom. Thanks for being with me today. Look forward to seeing you next time.